Welcome to Cow Talks. This is Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida. And this is our podcast, where we dive into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States. Join us in this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems. Hello and welcome to Cow Talks. This is Marcelo Wallau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. Today with me is my technician here, Elena. Mailhos. He's the coordinator for the variety trial, for the official variety trials for forages in Florida, and also Henry Jordan, variety trial manager for Auburn. Welcome, both of you.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Henry, this is not the first time we're doing this, and I think a lot of people hopefully have listened to previous episodes on the variety trials and the updates on the variety, on the results and recommendations and all that. For those that don't know, what is the official variety trial? What is the work that you do, and what is the work Elena does here?
So for Auburn, at least, I manage all of the variety trials for the state, and it's mainly small plot research, and I'm doing all the variety trials not only on our forages, but on our grain crops, row crops, all of those as well. So for the forage side, we're doing 6 locations for yield, and that's across the state, north to south Alabama. And then we have 1 location that we're just looking at the forages as far as when do they head out, when do they swap from from vegetative growth to reproductive growth. And so we're also running, so we're looking at yield, we're looking at when do we swap growth stages, and then we're looking at quality on the back end. So we're running quality for each harvest that we do.
And so you're getting a lot of data on productivity and nutritive value all across the state, right?
Yes, across the whole state.
How many locations you have in Auburn?
So Central Alabama, there are 3 locations. South Alabama, which would probably most interest y'all, would be 2 locations.
What about Florida?
So we have the variety trials for forage. We either grazing, hay, or silage. We don't do any row crop or grains. This year we had 3 sites, 2 on-farm variety testing, Central and North Florida, and then 1 at Citra, Florida, the experimental unit. And then there we did the official variety trials for the multi-cut and then the single cut. And we also had the disease nursery, which all our varieties are planted there, and it helps us knowing the susceptibility of the varieties to diseases. Like a new project, a cool one would be seeding rates, that it came up as a need to update our seeding rates, and what I would just tell the results or preliminary results later.
Nice. So it's a lot of effort going on. We also have variety trials that are happening in Georgia, in some of the other states in the Southeast. And the cool thing is that we always get together once a year to review the data from the different variety trials and discuss what we're going to make into the list of recommendations. A little bit of caveat, Florida and Georgia have a kind of official list of recommendations, which is basically the varieties that are performing above average. Henry and Auburn, you have a little bit different approach.
Yeah, I try to, instead of making a recommendation, oftentimes we get questions about what variety would work best, but it all depends on the situation. What are your goals? When do you need your grazing? Are you worried about warm season green up on your Bahia, your Bermuda? There's a lot of factors that we need to take into consideration. So just these are the varieties we recommend. It doesn't really encompass everything we need to take into consideration.
Awesome. Same for here, and also that's why we have expanded our Florida trials in the past year to include some on-farm locations and also different uses, as we talk about multi-cut kind of simulating grazing, and single cut would be more simulating the silage or hay production. Henry, your trial is also sponsored. It's a collaboration between the university and the industries. Do you have other commodity groups interested in the trial that also sponsor you?
As far as the forages, the only source of funding for the forage variety trials are the entry fees from the trial participants.
Good. We also charge those entry fees, which, by the way, do not cover the whole cost of the program. It is highly subsidized by the university or our programs here, our research programs. And we also count with the collaboration from the southeastern milk producers through the milk checkoff for part of it, and the Florida Cattle Enhancement Board for part of that effort as well, along with the entry fees, which is the collaboration with the industry.
So one thing that's a little bit unique about Auburn is we have a a variety selection tool that's an online tool that you can use to sift through the data and absorb a lot more of it at one time and not get too overwhelmed, hopefully. But that tool is funded by all of our commodity groups through checkoff dollars, and then the rest of it is funded through Auburn and Extension.
Awesome. And we're going to talk more about that tool and also about the tool we have here later on in this episode. And for those interested in learning more, check the description of the podcast. You'll find the links for both the variety trial web pages and for the tools we'll be talking about here. So you open here saying that we cannot really recommend because it's recommended for what? It really needs to come with the situation. And there is other thing is there is a lot of year variability. Elena was telling me that when we look into the year by year variation here, it's a lot. Let's explore a little bit. What have you seen in this past season that was interesting, especially if you can relate to some of the different uses in different responses you saw?
Well, I guess I've got several things we could talk about on this, but just talking about the year-to-year variability, we always try to recommend looking at multiple years of data so we can see some consistency across years and locations if possible. And just for the past 3 years, I don't want to call any varieties out, but the last 3 years, I've seen varieties that typically don't rise to the top. It's like one of those 3 years it rises to the top, and the other 2 years it may not be that great high yielding, or whether it's early season or late season. It all depends on the weather for that season, the rainfall, how cold it is, and we see every once in a while one variety will show up, and we're like, did we mess something up when we planted the trial? Is there something going on? And then I start looking at the weather pattern for the past however many years. And if we go back far enough, we say, hey, it performed well 5 or 6 or however many years ago. And the weather pattern is kind of similar to what this year's was. So I'm seeing that happen a lot. But just in general, what I've also seen is our early varieties typically perform good early. Our late varieties typically perform good late. This year was really interesting with the snow that we had in South Alabama, which is highly unusual. That caused a couple of our late varieties to really perform well early season. So that was something I was not expecting to happen this year.
This is very interesting you mentioned, because often some of the later varieties that are developed for climates that are a little colder than here, and one of those examples is Horizon 306 oat. It is a later variety and it is more cold tolerant. However, you're saying that it actually penalized a little bit because it did not recover as fast in terms of total productivity.
So on mine, I'm just thinking in terms of ryegrass. I've got a couple
Okay.
late varieties from Wax Seed Company, and they actually performed really well this year in early season, where they're typically a late season variety. It's that cold tolerance that helped them out at the beginning, is my guess.
Perfect. What about Florida?
So I was checking on the data, and then I saw that we had like a difference of 2,000 more pounds of yield this season, like this last season, compared to 23-24, and that's just because of the year effect. So if we recall the last year was a cool winter. We didn't have snow as Henry, but it was cold enough to make the grasses grow better than they develop. Then the previous year was more like a mild winter, where we had a faster development of the grasses than last year.
So is that accumulation of degree days, so accumulating very fast or maturing quite fast,
Exactly.
and then they play out very fast. Whereas in this year, we were probably not developing as fast, but ended up being more biomass.
So what I noticed was that this year, for example, for the first cut on the multi-cut, most of the varieties were on the vegetative stage. So most of them were able to recover and produce better than the year before, that most of them were all on the reproductive stage. For this, what I mean is that whenever we get to the reproductive stage, those tillers will die. And if we don't have any new tillers, we won't have much further. And the other thing that I noticed was regarding the diseases. Last year, we didn't have much disease incidence respect into 23-24, that we had a mild winter.
Which matches like a warmer winter is going to have a greater challenge with with diseases, pests and diseases. So one of the unique things, and I don't know if you're doing that, Henry, is we have the single cut trial that's kind of simulating. Well, it's not kind of. It is simulating the management that they do with the dairies because this is on farm and it's targeting that one silage cut that goes right early, right before planting corn. And we're planting corn anytime between the last week of February and the third week of March here. I have been trying to talk some of the farmers to delay planting corn a little bit because those 2 weeks really can put a lot of biomass here. If we can give it 2 weeks, sometimes we're talking about 1,500 extra pounds per acre of dry matter. It really can make a lot of difference in that cool season forage to put feed in the bunk. And it does not affect much of the corn production later on by delaying planting by a couple of weeks.
We have not been doing any single cut trials. All of ours are multi-cut.
So talking about cold weather, the year before, or last 23-24 season, we had a very, very cold week between Christmas and New Year, and that really hammered a lot of the trials and especially some of the oats suffered a lot. This past winter, we actually did not have as much mortality, even though it was even colder, which I think is a lot more because of the adaptation. The cold prior to that very cold spell. So we had a little longer, colder winter. But that's where some of the mixes is coming in play. I really love some of the farmers are working with, for example, in the dairies around our plots where pretty much triticale and oat mix, and that really adds a lot of flexibility and resilience to the system because if we have a cold weather, triticale can tolerate it much better than oat and actually ends up protecting a lot of the oat. You have done any mixed trials there or not yet?
No, all of ours are going to be monocultures. But what we saw this year as far as the cold damage, our oats fared really well. And with that snow that went all the way down to the coast, I think the snow provided more of an insulating effect than the year before or 2 years ago,
Yep.
whenever it was, when it just went straight cold and burned everything back to the ground. So it was interesting to see that insulation effect from the snow.
It is, and actually, Dr. Dubé had observed, and I think they put an article in the Panhandle Ag News to talk about the cold weather and how the plants recovered. It was pretty nice to see they've recovered. Talking about different situations, I think a lot of our farmers are planting. Well, of course, they're always looking for something early, the earliest, the best to get forage, and then at the same time, the longest season possible. I think you're big on your talk about what system are you using it for, and a lot of our farmers are using in some of those cool season forages, especially ryegrass, into sod, dormant sod, or not so dormant sod. What have you seen in the past year in terms of the earliness in some of the varieties or even the species that would fit well in that system?
So I guess first let's talk about the species. And this is for multiple years that I'm talking about. I've seen our cereal rye and our oats, and it can be variety specific in both of those, but I've seen those typically be earlier than our ryegrass. Our wheat tends to line up closer to the ryegrass, and then the triticale can vary and be kind of in the middle. But if we're looking at growth curves, our rye and our oats are typically going to peak out before our ryegrass. So I feel like they can complement each other in extending the growing season on that early part of the season, and then the ryegrass, depending on which variety you get, you could extend the grazing season a lot further out. One thing that's been kind of a hot topic in Alabama is overseeding our ryegrass into warm season pastures. And a lot of guys have seen if they plant a really late variety or even a moderately late variety, they end up having some reduced stands or negative impacts on their bahia particularly. So that's one thing that we're wanting to address when we're looking at how to place these varieties. If you're overseeding into a bahia pasture, you're probably going to want to pick something that's earlier as far as swapping over to reproduction so we don't have that competition effect.
Yeah. So this is something interesting. We're submitting a paper for publication now. One of our former students, Hannah Rush, she did a project with different tillage methods or land prep methods in cool season establishment of cool season forages. And it was interesting because, our soils here are so sandy, right? It's very, very sandy. We had very good results in terms of more water in the soil when you have no till. Of course, you're not exposing that soil. And then we have that notion that when you put no-till, it's going to delay productivity. Well, turns out that whenever you are getting that nitrogen, split nitrogen, we're getting that 30 to 50 pounds of nitrogen right after planting, coming back about 45 days after planting again, when the cool season for the start tillery, that no-till was very comparable to a tilled ground in terms of productivity. Actually ended up being better, potentially because of that higher water in the soil. So it's very interesting to see how we can adapt some of those. It's not only the variety, it's not only the species, but also the management practice that can help it. So it's a whole system.
So I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball. We had the opposite effect this year at two of our locations. I don't know if you remember how dry it was in October, but two locations in central Alabama, one was conventional, one was no-till. The conventional tilled location, they were planted approximately the same time, beginning of October. So the conventional tilled one, they were able to go in and do some deep tillage and bring up some moisture. So we got germination right on time. As soon as we planted, within a week or two, we had a full stand. The other location was no-tilled. It was dry. There was no moisture, and it essentially got dusted in. So it sat there and sat there and sat there until the end of November before we got any rain. And so we were able to get into the field and start harvesting or have a grazing event, whatever you want to call it, a lot earlier in that conventional tilled location just because we were to get establishment earlier. So that
So
whole
the
moisture
initial,
factor was really critical this year for those two locations.
yeah, well, I'll risk say not this year. Like every year, the moisture is a determining factor. Yeah, that's interesting. So the initial moisture is going to make a lot of difference. Let's get going. Again, I'm big on that early fertilization for people that really want that early. But so if you use an early variety, but you don't have the nutrients available early, it's really not going to make a lot of difference. Have you talked to the seed companies a lot to see about seed availability this year or issues
I
on
have
seed
not
availability?
I have not talked about seed availability with them as much. A lot of it depends on our retailers, what they carry. That drives a lot of the market down here. And then a lot of our guys, as far as seed companies go, they're either trying to find more retailers or distributors in the area. So that's one of their issues they're dealing with. And then the other thing that I found was really interesting is we made a trip out to Oregon and visited some of the seed companies and a couple of growers and got to see ryegrass production in Oregon. So we've kind of got conflicting interest as far as ryegrass production. A lot of our growers want the earliest producing variety as far as forage yield. When can we produce our biomass early? But what they tell me from Oregon is our earlier varieties tend to be lower in seed production. And so those guys are the equivalent of our grain producers. They want to produce the most grain they can produce because that's where they must make their money. And so the market doesn't really pay a premium for early producing variety that's low in seed production. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic how the seed production side and the forage production side kind of have a little bit of a competing interest there.
Yes, it is. And seed production is often one of the limitations, especially when we're trying to have new varieties in the market. I was able to talk to several of our representatives. And it's great to see that variety, I'm going to call them recommended here, or the top performing varieties in our trials, most of them are going to be available in the market, except for the experimental ones. One of the limited constraints, I think Mixon has limited availability of 405 rye, which is a new variety that's coming to substitute the 401. A lot of people are familiar with the 401 rye, which I would risk to say probably the fastest growing winter forage we have. The only thing, it grows too fast. It goes too fast that it goes into reproductive stage too fast, and then it has a limited potential for grazing.
I would say that's one of those early season varieties. So particularly in Alabama, it can get away from you and swap to reproductive growth and be done. But it's probably one of those varieties that, with the right planting date, could give you some grazing before we get too cold and shut down and give us some grazing, say December, January timeframe.
It's all about what you want or what you're interested in. I talked also to our colleagues at our friends at Tricolumn. They had last issues with some of the varieties last year, in terms of seed supply. This year they're good, and there's a lot of seed availability for two of the new ones that have been released by IUF. It's 1143 and also Sprinter that has been performing super well in our trials. I also talked to our friends in northern Georgia, Southeast Agri Seeds, to see what's the availability in some of the legumes that they deal with. And apparently some of the most sold forage legumes, especially the rennet clover, are a little bit short. So I always tell our producers here, if you're planning on planting something and you want to use good quality seed in recommended varieties, top performing varieties, don't wait until October to start sourcing them. Go ahead and try to secure them early.
Plan ahead.
You bet. So Harry and I we've been talking about another topic that's of interest is seeding rates, seed size. Do we need to readjust the seeding rates because of the different seed sizes in the new genetics? So last year we started one seeding rate trial. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So we chose two old varieties with different growth habit, same seed weight, different growth habit, and more post-trade, and the other one more straight. And we planted different seeding rates for both. Actually, we have preliminary data. As a summary, would be that the yield didn't differ from the different seeding rates. And then 110.
I think we went all the way up to 130.
130?
130.
Okay, yeah, 130 then. But then in the middle, we didn't see any difference for yield, meaning that we might be able to lower our seeding rates without compromising our yield, that we still need to test at second year to be sure. And for those, just the straight growth variety showed that difference at the post-trade didn't. So yeah, we are excited to see more results and try to publish as soon as possible to use as a recommendation.
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of space for reviewing some of those seeding rates. A lot of this work has been done decades ago, and we have advanced so much in terms of genetics and in terms of management practices that it's worth looking. We're also looking into seeding rate for sorghum Sudan in the spring and summer planting, to see if we can fine tune that. Hopefully we can get some more crops this year in this evaluation. But there's so much difference also based on the variety, just because of the growth habit and the vigor. We're expecting to see a lot more difference between the seeding rates and with the inheriting. We went, as Elena said, from 50 in 20-pound increments all the way to 130 pounds, and there was not as much difference. We used two oats that were very different in growth habit. One was much more prostrate, one was much more erect growth habit. And we saw a little more round exposed right at the lower seeding rates, which could potentially result in more weeds, which was one concern. But they were sprayed, so we didn't see any reduction in the production potential there.
From my perspective, I would like to see a recommendation instead of pounds per acre. I would like to see a recommendation based on seed per acre.
Yeah.
I know in our forage variety trials, we don't have the same number of varieties as far as wheat and triticale. We don't have a large number of varieties to look at. But in my grain trials, I'll look at all the wheat varieties and as far as seed size, and from top to bottom, I can see a double of number of seed per pound when we're looking at seed size. It's pretty dramatic on the grain side. I would imagine if we had the right varieties to look at on the forage side, we would see that as well.
So we did, right?
Yeah, we did that last year. We weighed every variety that came to see how many seeds per pound we had. And we saw a huge difference within the varieties.
Double.
That's why for this seeding rate, we chose same seed weight, because the difference was huge.
One of the things that was a little bit surprising is that most of the varieties that were available in the market, and we chose varieties that were in the market versus varieties that are experimental still. And one of the things that we saw is that most of the varieties that are in the market were much closer in terms of number of seeds per pound. So then we decided to go with two that were very similar in seed size. But I'd love to do that. Harry is looking into varieties of extremely different seed sizes and look at plant population with those also.
Our first plan was to do examine the contrasting weights But in the end, they just were experimental, so we weren't able to find them in the market yet. So that's why we ended up choosing those varieties.
So talking a little bit about experimental, I'm very excited to see some of the varieties that we tested, or some of the entries that we tested this year that are fresh from our breeding programs, kind of in the later part of the evaluation process, hopefully hitting the market soon. We have some ryegrasses that really outperform everything else we tested. I was very excited. And I was looking into the 2-year data. Of course, our trial here in Gainesville is newer than, we don't have a long record for a lot of those. But over the past 2 years, those new varieties or those new lines not released yet have been really, really outperforming. I'm excited to see those. Same thing for oats, same thing for triticale. We have some very nice experimental material in line here.
I'm seeing some good looking stuff come through on the oat side as far as experimentals. We've been testing some black oats from the University of Florida that look, I think there's one of those either on the market or about to be on the market. Those look pretty good as far as early season stuff. And then ryegrass, we're seeing some interesting stuff come through on the ryegrass as well.
Nice.
I'd just like to bring up the head dates that I'm doing over here at Auburn and looking at the order of entries as far as when we're swapping from vegetative to reproductive growth. Even in South Alabama, we did 2 locations in South Alabama this year that would be pretty applicable to you. We're looking at a 20 to a 30-day spread across all of our varieties. Let's just assume that they all mature at the same rate from the date that we rated them. You're talking about a month difference on your overseeded Bahia. So that's a month more competition that Bahia is going to have to deal with if you choose the wrong variety. So that's something that we really need to focus in on and think about when we're overseeding in our warm season perennials.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. We're not looking into heading date here just because it means another trial, which, by the way, the whole forage variety testing program is here. Elena pretty much doing everything. So it's hard to expand, but we just take notes about timing of cutting or maturity at time of cutting.
Yes, maturity of time of cutting. And then we are trying to register the maturity stage on the disease nursery as well.
Which makes a lot of difference.
I guess the other cool thing in looking at those head dates is the last 2 years we did one location in North Alabama where it was we just planted it and let it go to seed and see what happened. And then this year at the 2 South Alabama locations, we planted it, harvested it just like the rest of the trial, and then at the end of the season when we started to get reproductive growth, we quit harvesting that extra rep. And so by looking at the 2 different management styles that cut, remove the biomass and reset it, cut, remove the biomass, and having our harvest events, we extended that season out further as far as if we're looking at heat units or growing degree days. That was a pretty dramatic difference in that cut and reset it versus just go straight to reproductive growth.
Nice. So we talked all about those variety trials. There's a lot of information. And how can we access the data and how can we access the information that's coming out of the Auburn trials?
So for the Auburn trials, the best thing to do is just Google Auburn variety testing and you'll find our webpage pretty easy. We've got links and shortcuts to the variety selection tool to hopefully put you on some of the most requested stuff. And then we have video tutorials on how to work the tool if you want to get some lessons. If there's something that you can't figure out how to do, feel free to reach out to me, give me a call. I'll be glad to help you any way I can.
Awesome. What about Florida?
So our information can be found at the Forage team webpage under the official variety trials. And then in these publications that we should have the 2025.
Yeah, we should 2025 cool season for the right recommendation. But the same as you mentioned, the easiest way to find all that is just put in your search engine Florida variety trials, Florida forage recommendation, and that's going to be the easiest way to navigating to the website. Regardless, we're going to put the links in the description of this podcast so people can find it easy. Just want to mention that Georgia also has a very large variety trial program. A lot of the especially grain information is coming here too. They're very good. We do have a tool, Harry. So we're not as yellows. It's not as nice as yours, but so far we only included the sorghum and corn forage sorghum, forage corn, and in silage corn trials in that too. It's quite simple, but I think it fits the purpose that brings the information in a simple way to the farmers. I really like the tool you have there because it gives you a lot of power to look into that data, especially sort and multi-year and everything, and really tells you. And as always, we have some other publications that we try to do in terms of blogs and cattlemen magazine to put out the word that people can find that information out there. Good. Well, appreciate both of you joining me today in this podcast. And for those that are not familiar with the other podcasts, make sure to scroll down on your feed and find some of the other conversations that we have about co-season forages, about planting, about fertility, and much more. Hope you enjoyed this conversation, and I'll see you in the next Cow Talks podcast. Thank you. This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage team with technical support from the University of Florida College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Wallau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu, and find us on our social media. uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube. We hope to see you in our next episode.